So, without further ado, let's hear from RDK squared.
Good afternoon, and also, again, thanks for coming. Our assignment was the Jenny and Rob homestead, with particularly wanting to address the key peak oil scenario issues. So we put our goals in a sense of bullet points. Okay, the focus was on food production, fuel for heating, cooking, cooling, sharing with local friends network, healing, nourishing our earth, other needs that may not be described here. One example, artists' materials for Jenny, or whatever other needs may come up. We wanted to emphasize low maintenance crops, year-round food production, from vegetables to nuts to berries, fruits, wood fuel resources, a diversity within all these things to meet their needs as well as things to share. Reduce heating and cooling needs, and of course, fun and education. So, as Dave started to show you, one of the very first steps is, of course, getting your base map, which means going to the site and finding all the things that are already there and existing and mapping that out. Then we head out with paper, trace paper, all sorts of things to do a site analysis. And this is our final site analysis. There were many pieces of trace paper on the way to this one that we didn't bring to show you. It would take way too much time. But some of the things we want to focus on in the site analysis in order to build a case for our design. Why we made the decisions that we did, chose the plants and trees and things that we chose, put them in the areas that we did. So the most key things that we need to focus on are landform, water, the sources of, the drainage, climate, microclimate, access, circulation, the soils, microclimate, I think I already said, existing species, infrastructure, everything as thorough as possible. Power lines, where the road is, all these things. Then once we have that and we pull together all our trace papers, we do our best to, of course, analyze everything together on one map in order to understand the key things that we think really will direct our choices. In particular, sunny areas, maybe areas that could be difficult in the soil because it's the leach field, proximity to roads or buildings, the soil in terms of wet and how the water flows, the drainage, as I said. As you can see, I think, from just what you're looking at, we have all sorts of writing everywhere to remind ourselves as why, what we thought about these areas, and what they might give us ideas for. We write observations and interpretations for what we've put here so that information can then be there to help us make our choices and drive our design. Okay?
Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome, Kelly.
I'm Kelly Sandman, second or 1/4 of the team. Kathy described our gathering of information, so we tried to stay as open to everything as possible. So here we were just saying it is wet here, and then we kind of moved towards okay, it's wet here, what can we possibly do with this area? So we started to go with our schematic themes, and we base these on patterns that we notice on the landscape and on the homestead itself. So, and then we also keep referring back to Jenny and Rob's goals. So what do they want to achieve with this, and then how can we make it work with the things that we know, which is a lot of stuff. And a lot of them start to, well, we could put that there, but no, this would be better here, it's not good because of this, and so on. So we sift through that. We start coming up with ideas, like Jenny and Rob want to foster their community. So we started thinking of outdoor living spaces and areas that already have buildings on them that are a little higher, so they're not going to be in swampy places. It's very important to us that we make it accessible, so we start forming our paths through. There are some parts of the garden that are already quite beautiful and doing really well, so we start to develop them into patches and kind of tweak them here and there and make them healthier, build them up. Jenny and Rob wanted to incorporate playfulness, so we started thinking about, okay, this is a good place for a forest lawn. Maybe they could play games there. It would be low maintenance, they wouldn't have to mow. So this is kind of taking all of our observations and start thinking like, okay, these are all of our resources, where's the best place to put them? We based a lot of this on different patterns that we saw, and we thought that the biggest overlying pattern is productive landscape mosaic, and that is the idea that there are patches of kind of productivity, and we saw this in Ginny and Rob's landscape, as in there are, you grow some things here, you grow some things there, you grow other things here, but also as Ginny and Rob is part of a bigger productive landscape. So it's how they fit within that community. Off of this comes zones, outdoor living room, kind of semi-private public spaces, islands in the corridor, so you provide access to all those spaces, habitat diversity, all of the things that we think are important for the site and for our goals.
After we recognize the patterns and we have the analysis of the land, we want to start detailing more the piece of land, the patches, and what the possibilities are, whether it's planting or amendments or the microclimates that are there. So there's a lot here. I'm going to try my best to get through it, but I'm not sure I'll be able to touch on everything. I'm going to start with the orchard. It is one of the biggest pieces of the biggest patch that we identified on the land. Currently, it is dominated by apples. There are 3 apple trees. There's also black locust, and actually, I'm sorry, 4 or 5 apple trees. So you want to start to think, what does the apple tree need? What kind of environment does it create? And what can we do with that space? Some of the things that I want to talk to you about, apples first are considered kind of an unsociable tree, and they're also very disease vulnerable, so we want to consider that. You might want, we are thinking pest confusers, very aromatic plants that would possibly get pests away from the area, things like lemon balm and thyme. They also are moderate in their nitrogen consumption, so you might want to think what kinds of nitrogen sources can we get into this plot of land. Animals we station nearby, possible chickens that could also pick through the orchard throughout the season, eat up any of the apples that are rotting and have worms in them. So trying to find low maintenance ways to deal with the orchard. There's also quite a bit of space, so you would want to establish some kind of ground cover that would prevent any weeds from coming up in the orchard. Yarrow would be a good one. It's a dynamic accumulator. It's also a strong medicinal and would spread throughout the orchard. The orchard is also partly characterized by a butternut nearby that releases moderate amounts of juglone. I'm sure you'll be hearing about that throughout the afternoon. So juglone is a chemical that's released by the roots that can inhibit the growth of other species. So you want to be planting juglone tolerant trees there. All right, I'm going to move on here. We also identified a berry patch here. There were large clumps of raspberries, and thought that this could become its own berry patch. However, it's rather thin in terms of diversity. There's only raspberry there now, so we would suggest planting some other small trees that could provide an overstory for it, possibly pear or another dwarf tree or scrubby nut tree that could have the raspberries underneath. Okay, moving on. So I said that this was dominated by a butternut tree. So because it was, currently it's an open space, has trees, a high tree overstory, I thought it'd be a nice shaded area for people to hang out in and have some recreation. So we suggested this be a forest lawn with a very low steppable ground cover underneath and high overstory. Eventually, you could also use these as investments for building materials, tule poplar or some kind of larger tree that you could eventually harvest for wood. Moving towards the stream, which actually comes down this way, you have a coppice patch. And this is a very wet area of the property. So, and there are already willows there. So we suggested using these willows and propagating them as a coppice species. You can just cut off a branch, stick it in the ground, and it grows. And you just, you cut it off, I guess every winter, is it? And it sprouts new branches that you can then use as firewood. Other building materials you could put in here are locusts. Okay. This is dominated definitely by the wetness of the area. Here, which we mentioned was the leach field for the septic system. Because the pipes are there, you don't want anything that's going to be rooting deeply and destroying the pipes. So we suggested this be an open, sunny area. We were a little torn as to what to do with it, but I'll give you two ideas we had. It could be an extension of this recreation area, so it would be open lawn, it could be wildflowers, something that's shallow rooting. The second idea we had was a one-time annual harvest here, something like a Three Sisters garden or something that would be there for the entire time, whether it be Jerusalem artichokes or corn or beans. And this edge, this was a very complicated space, but we noticed that there were already patches forming, so we thought that they could be merging nuclei. They're kind of islands as they are right now. We have the pawpaws, which are self-propagating and could eventually fill a larger patch, and they're doing very, very well there, very happy. This patch, we were thinking we would want to plant a succession for. These are trees that eventually get very big and could potentially threaten the leach field. We have beech, ginkgo, and cherry, all of which will get quite big, and a redbud in there as well. Well, I'm going to save some time and move on to reach it here, so thank you.
I could just keep it for a brief minute. Just for a little bit. I will be speaking more about what kind of species we chose for different, in these two different patches that we identified, and how they are working, because essentially we want to use species that are complementary and work cooperatively with each other, and also that they contribute to each other, they are self-fertilizing, so you do not have to put too much investment and too much care. So essentially that's the really idea of a gill. And while, so in our orchard, I'm giving you an example only of the apple tree. It was really too much time to build a gill for every tree that was in the orchard or in the other patches. So I'll briefly show you two gills that we sort of elaborated. So this is the apple tree, and under the apple, I'll go by season. We planted some rams, which are the first things that come up in early spring. They also are aromatic pest confusers, so we want to have them around here. And then there is the understory of golden saxifrage, which is also early blooming, low ground cover. Then we planted some dwarf comfrey. Comfrey is a dynamic accumulator. It collects a lot of minerals from the soil and contributes to the fertility of the area around the tree. And then there were lots of dandelions around it. Again, it's a low ground cover, and it is also a dynamic accumulator. It accumulates different types of minerals up. It has long tap roots. Then we had strawberries all along here, which was again a ground cover and would provide food during the whole growing season. And then a whole bunch of thyme around here. They are also aromatic pest confusers, and in order to provide a more healthy environment for the tree to grow in. Surrounding this, we have patches of yarrow. Yarrow blooms early. It is also a specialist nectary where specialist insects come here. So this is to attract those kind of insects. And then we have, that is the chamomile. And this was yarrow. It's again a specialist, I think. And in this way we built this gill so it could be self-sustaining, one could access it easily and use this patch. And we would replicate this in different, under different apple trees